All right, we are top of the hour. I always like to be respectful of everyone's time, so I'm just gonna get started with a quick introduction as people are starting to trickle in. Got a good group joining us today, which is fantastic. It's a great topic. It's a fun topic that I like to talk about. So I'm excited about this month's webinar around budgeting and financial goal setting. Before I dive into that, we've been having a few newer people join into these meetings, so I did want to, it's been a little while since we did a quick introduction, to remind people about GBS Retire, who we are, what we do, in terms of retirement planning, financial planning for whether you're within one of the 401k plans that we work with, or you're joining from connection through GBS Benefits or even the Levitt Group, or even just found us on social media and LinkedIn. We welcome you to these webinars. We're always happy to go through a lot of different financial topics. Our goal at GBS Retire is really to help as many people as we can prepare for retirement and prepare for those financial goals. A few different topics there that I really like to focus on: financial goals, getting a better view of your financial picture, ongoing support and guidance. Because as we know, things are changing on a day-to-day, month-to-month, year-to-year basis, whether that's in your goals, your finances, or just politics and economics around the world. Things are always changing. So that ongoing support and guidance, we always want you to be comfortable reaching out to us and relying on us for questions that come up. And the last one, yes, we are pretty retirement focused, but overall retirement and goals, helping you plan for those goals that you imagine. As I go today, feel free to drop questions in the Q&A. I'll address those as I can and then save some time at the end for questions. I'll try and keep the presentation to about 30 minutes, but happy to stay on after for any lingering questions as well, about the topics today. So like I said, I'm excited about our webinar this month around budgeting and goal setting. I'm going to start with setting financial goals because I think a lot of times whenever we think about our financial plan, in general, the financial goals are always the center. The financial goals that you have, whether that's short-term, midterm, or long-term goals, is always the center of the plan, and we build everything about the plan around that. All of our recommendations come from those goals. And so having those goals be front and center is an intentional decision that I like to focus on today. And then budgeting. We're always talking about budgeting. Budgeting can be hard, so it's always a good idea, especially towards the end of the year as we're approaching the new year, where oftentimes we set a lot of financial goals. Having that budget in mind, I think, is very beneficial and very helpful to help prepare us for those goals next year. And a lot of people wait until the new year, January, before they start thinking about those goals and getting those down. I would encourage you to do that throughout the rest of this month. And as you have some time off towards the end of the year, thinking about those goals and getting a plan in place for next year. So just diving right in, starting off with goal setting and the importance of those goals. I can't stress the importance of setting financial goals enough. A great quote from Tony Robbins there: setting goals is the first step in turning the invisible into the visible, right? And there's a lot of different strategies and influencers around there who will give different recommendations on how to set those goals towards the end of the year and the new year. And I don't think it matters too much what process you take, as long as you have something in place, right? That's the most important part, to be excited about something going into the new year. Uh, an author and leadership expert, John Maxwell, if you're familiar with him, he said that he spends the last week of every year just reviewing, the year in different areas, his journal notes, calendar, to evaluate how he spent his time and energy. And I like to implement that. I don't do quite a full week. I like to spend a couple days evaluating financially where I am and how I grew that year financially, and then setting and creating those goals for next year. So I say towards the end of the year, the end of the month, especially as we're going into January 2026, which is crazy how quickly that's come. It is a great opportunity, regardless of what your goals are, to start looking at how far you've come this year to get you excited about those goals into next year. And it could be something as simple as just getting a budget in place for 2026, or paying off debt. You want to pay off X amount of debt in 2026. Or maybe you're a little bit past that and now you're trying to save for a down payment on a house, or save for retirement, save for kids' education, or different types of legacy goals, whatever that may look like. So there's a lot of things I would encourage you to get excited about going into the new year. I love this little comic here because it's very true. And I see this a lot of people who are transitioning into retirement who didn't have a solid plan in place, didn't have goals that they were reaching for. And they kind of just say, okay, well, here's what I have. Here's what I'm expecting from Social Security. What kind of retirement can I have from this? And it's the same thing with all of our goals, right? If we don't have a specific goal in place, if we don't know what we're trying to target, what we're aiming for, then essentially we're going to hit what we hit, and then we're going to figure it out once we get there, right? You shoot the arrow, and then you take your paintbrush and draw the bullseye around the arrow. It's humorous, but it's not how we should be structuring our financial goals, right? We should know what we're shooting for. We should know the target that we're aiming at, and then we're not going to be perfect. We're not going to hit the bullseye every single time, and that's to be expected. That's good, but we'll be close. We'll be a lot closer than if we didn't have those targets in place. Right? The people that I've been working with that have had a retirement goal, or whether it's retirement or unrelated to retirement, they have that goal in place and they're working towards that. They may not hit it exactly, but they're infinitely closer than they would have been had they just been shooting blindly. So that just helps to drive home the importance of having those goals and just setting them and then evaluating our progress towards those goals. The first thing I always recommend is to document your goals. We've got to write it down somewhere, right? We got to know what those goals are that we're reaching for and have it so it's visual and available for us to see. I always recommend just initially, if you haven't done this practice before, just get a piece of paper out, whether it's a physical paper on your phone. My wife and I, we use a whiteboard that's in my home office. We just have a whiteboard where we write all of our goals down. Just throw them out there on the page. Just write all of your goals, whether they're short-term, mid-term, long-term, just get them out, get them visible, and then start to assign timeframes to them, right? I always recommend having short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals to be working towards so that you have, steps in place to get to your ultimate long-term goals. You'll see a few different examples here. Build an emergency fund. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later. That's very crucial for the whole plan, but specifically when we talk about budgeting as well. Paying off debt. You can see under the midterm goals, I was intentional about saving for down payment on a house. Under midterm goals, I think a lot of people jump too quickly into home ownership when maybe they should wait a little bit longer. If anyone is here that has not yet bought a home and is kicking themselves for having not bought a home yet, I would say don't worry too much about it, right? You can be patient when it comes to home ownership. Homes are very expensive, often considered not so much an investment, but more of a commodity, just because of how expensive they can be. So I'm pro home ownership. They can serve a purpose as a good asset, but don't worry about waiting and properly planning for that, right? You don't ever want to buy a home too soon and then have 30, 40, $50,000 worth of repairs that then completely wreck the rest of your financial plan. So it's okay to be patient with that and a lot of these other goals as well. So the first step is to, like I said, write them down, document those goals, get them in front of you. You don't have to put them on the mirror in your bathroom or anything unless that's what you want, but get them visible in front of you and be thinking about them as you go throughout this month and really through the rest of the year. Think about those goals. If you're looking for a book, there was a book called Psycho-Cybernetics. That's a fascinating principle of how envisioning these goals in our minds can help to alter our subconscious in a way where our subconscious starts to direct us towards those goals even further. So it just helps us to accomplish those goals even quicker. So good book I'd recommend if you're looking for one. The next thing you want to do once you have those goals and a time frame set aside for those goals is to quantify them, put a number to that goal. So as an example with cars, we see people turn over cars quite a bit nowadays, and it can be a very expensive purchase that we all have to go through at some point. And having a number to that, right, is very important so you can properly plan for that. As an example, let's say that I'm planning to buy, a $50,000 car in 7 years. 7 years from now, that car is not going to be $50,000, is it? So we need to remember inflation and maybe build in a little bit of a buffer. So instead of 50,000, we're now going to need 60 or 65,000 at that time for that car goal. The important thing is to have a number to them. All right, with my wife and I, we have a house and we are, expecting probably in the next, I don't know, 10 to 12 years or so, going to want to upgrade into a slightly bigger house, right? Depends on how life goes, how many kids we decide to have. We may need to upgrade that house at some point. So we have that goal out there and an expected amount for a down payment that we would want. That number then leads to how much we need to be saving specifically for that goal. So we need to quantify it. We need to know how much we're targeting so that when we get to that point, we don't have, say we needed 100,000 for the down payment. Now we only have 40,000. Well, that's not going to be enough. And so we're going to have to alter things at that point. So having that quantifiable goal in place is also very important. Because from there, like I said, we can backtrack and say, how much do I need to be saving? And where do I need to be saving in order to accomplish that? And this is what helps to make those goals more realistic, right? Where you have a process and steps in place to help you accomplish that. Now, it depends on the time frame for those goals, right? If they're short-term goals, right? Let's say we're planning to buy a car in the next 2 or 3 years, right? We don't have a whole lot of time to invest that money, so you want it to be very safe. That's more shorter term money. Really, anything that's, I would say, 3 years or less is going to be short-term money. Any savings for those short-term goals really shouldn't be invested, at least not very aggressively. You want those in a very accessible, low risk account, like a high yield savings account, right? Right now, those are what, 3 to 3.5%. So a little bit better interest than your traditional savings account, but they're not going to be fluctuating. They're FDIC insured, so you don't have to worry about losing money and it'll be there for you when you need it. So those are for those more short-term goals. Again, anything roughly 3 years or less. The longer term goals, so 3 to maybe 7 years is going to be more midterm, and then 7+ years in terms of an investment horizon. Those longer term goals should be invested for some growth, right? And it can be invested conservatively for those more midterm goals or more aggressively for those long-term goals. Obviously, anything that's going to be earmarked for, 59 and a half years old or later would be more efficient in a retirement account. Whether it's a 401k, Roth 401k, 403b, 457, individual retirement account, whatever types of retirement accounts you have through your employer, that would be more efficient for money earmarked for 60 plus. Any money that's going to be used prior to retirement or prior to age 59 and a half would be better in a taxable or brokerage investment account. And that's where you can invest it for some more growth, potentially have some additional tax benefits along with that. Now, we don't have too much time to go further into detail around those investment accounts or investing there, but if you want to meet at another time to go through that specific to your goals, we can talk about some recommendations there and where to have that invested. But you need to have a dollar amount set for each of those goals. And then automation is going to be your best friend. I'll talk about automation more in the budgeting section as well, but automation is one of the top, I would say maybe 3 to 5 keys in terms of being successful with your financial plan is that automation. Automating these goals on a monthly, biweekly, whatever basis you want to set that, having that go in without you having to actually think about it and go in and manually make those contributions or deposits. Now, this one's very important, prioritizing those goals, right? Because if you go back, if we come back to this page where we have all these different goals, we may not be able to have the income each month to fund each one of these goals at the same time, right? We only have a set amount of money each paycheck, each month. And so we need to prioritize those goals and fund the ones that are most important. I would say the emergency savings, the emergency fund is going to be probably the top priority. If you don't have anything saved for an emergency, start there. That is very, very, very important. Then tackling some debt. If you have debt, especially high interest debt, you want to get that taken away and out of the picture as soon as possible, and then look at some of those other goals as well. Retirement savings is obviously an important one. Down payment on a home, I put that after retirement savings intentionally. And as an example, right, way down on my list of goals that my wife and I would like to accomplish someday is maybe a vacation home, right? And I'll say that's way down on the priority list, right? We're not funding that right now because we have other priorities that are more pressing. Retirement, I would say I would rather retire early than have a vacation home in my personal priorities. So I'm funding retirement, but not funding that vacation goal, as an example. Now, I may get through some of those more short and midterm goals, accomplish those. My income goes up a little bit at a time. Therefore, I'm able to take some money at some point and fund one of those other goals that are of lower priority. But you need to prioritize them for yourself based on how quickly you want to be accomplishing those. And again, sometimes it'll be a little bit of a push and pull. If your priority is to retire earlier, then you may not be able to fund some of those goals. Maybe you don't care about that and you enjoy working and want to continue to work past a traditional retirement age, then you can fund retirement maybe a little bit less, and then some of those other goals a little bit more. So there's always a little bit of a push and pull, but you do need to prioritize these goals as you're going through them as well. And that leads right into budgeting, because like I said, we only have a fixed amount of income each pay period, each month. And so we need to be prioritizing that and figuring out how we can allocate some more money to some of those goals, right? I see a lot of people spending a lot of money on eating out, which I'll admit I can be susceptible to that as well. It's easy to do nowadays. Finding some opportunities like that to reroute that money each pay period or each month to some of those priorities that are a bit more important to you. So when it comes to budgeting, I want to take us through, I want to have a little fun with this, take us through a few different examples. We're going to go through Jack Sparrow and John Wick. Intentionally pick these names. So we'll keep them anonymous, but I think you'll be able to get where I'm going with this. So Jack Sparrow, in his essential budget category, spends about $3,000 a month just on wine. For housing, he has over $75 million total in property across the world. Has about 45 luxury cars worth millions and millions of dollars. Spends $200,000 a month. Yes, a month on air travel, $150,000 a month on security, $300,000 a month on staff, credit cards, $55,000 a month. Has some fun expenses. You can see those emergencies that come up, right? He had a $7 million unexpected divorce and included, 25 plus million. These are all estimated amounts, by the way, in legal fees, and then estimated $100 million in unpaid taxes. And this is a real example. His net worth was about $650 million. And then because he was living above his means, beyond his means, he did not have a proper budget in place. His net worth declined and is now about 150 million. I think he'll be fine with his 150 million, right? But it's a significant decline. And if he didn't, correct things, patch things up, he would have ended up like a lot of other wealthy people that have declared bankruptcy. A lot of examples of people that have done that. So he was living above his means. Now let's switch to a different example. In this case, John Wick. John Wick has a modest $8 million home, takes the subway, public transportation, and occasionally his motorcycles because he's a big motorcycle fan. He doesn't have security or has nearly as much security. For clothes, it's very reasonable. Jeans, t-shirt, leather jacket, right? You see those posts, if you know who I'm talking about, you see those posts online of him, very reasonable, modest living. Fun, he does motorcycles, typical hobbies, right? Surfing, horseback riding, nothing too crazy. Emergency, I'm sure there are some emergency room visits if you're, on the motorcycle, accidents happen, motorcycle parts, things break down. The actor who portrayed John Wick has a net worth north of 380 million and climbing, right? Now, these are both very wealthy individuals who led different lives in terms of their financial lives and their budgeting and have ended up with very different results, right? One is whose net worth has been significantly declining, the other whose net worth has been increasing. Right, and these are extreme examples, right? So maybe we can bring it down to earth a little bit. But it applies with any of us, whether we're making 50,000, 200,000 a year. If we live above and beyond our means, so spending more than we're making, then it makes sense that our net worth is going to be decreasing and we're going to be putting ourselves into a bad spot. Whereas if we follow the example of John Wick and live below our means, you can have people making $50,000 a year that are retired multimillionaires. It's very possible. We see it all the time. Now, so let's take a step back and talk very simply about a budget. So what is a budget? A budget is very simply income minus your expenses, which will then equal a surplus or a shortage. And the key with a budget, regardless of how big or small your budget is, it's always a planned expense compared to your planned income. So it's always forward looking. Yes, we look backwards to see, what have we been spending our money on and what categories, but that is all to affect and implement the future budget looking forward. So we have to look at what we're working with, right? Our income month to month, and it depends. Some of you will be paid every other week. Some of you will be paid once a week, others every month. Sometimes you're paid only once a quarter, right? Depending on what type of income you have. If you have consistent income, that's easy. Just figure out, what your monthly income is based on that amount. Others, if you're maybe commission-based where your pay varies month to month, I like to average 3, 6, sometimes even 12 months if that's appropriate, and use that as kind of your base for your budget. And I always recommend not using gross, so using your take-home pay. So it's always after your retirement savings, after your taxes are taken out, medical insurance, all those things that are taken out before you receive your paycheck. Then you take your take-home pay, whatever you get into your pocket, and distribute it into your budget. That's what you actually have to work with month to month. Then you look at your expenses. And it's in this area that I like to use some of those what we call performance monitoring tools. Some people call them budgeting tools. They're really performance monitoring because they're monitoring your past and current expenses. And there's a lot of those out there. Mint was one of them before it got dissolved into Credit Karma, I believe is kind of what took its place, which that one does it as well. So Credit Karma, Rocket Money is another example of one that's very popular. You've probably seen the commercials online about that. We have a tool as well that you can use to look into this that I'll introduce here in a minute. But those are really good if you can link your credit cards and bank accounts to those. They'll pull in those transactions and give you estimates on what you've been spending your money on. Now, in a lot of cases, you have to pay a little bit of money for that. Um, Copilot just popped into my head. Copilot is another one. Copilot Money, I believe, through the App Store that you can get. And again, there's typically a monthly payment for these, but they often have free trials. So if you just want to get the 2-week free trial or whatever, play around with it, give you an idea of what you're spending in each of these categories, then you can cancel that, or if you decide it's worth it, to continue to pay a little bit a month. I would much rather you pay $10, $20 a month for something like this than another Netflix or Peacock subscription or whatever. There's tons nowadays of those subscriptions, right? So you evaluate one you can cancel there and just route it into one of these performance monitoring tools, like I mentioned. So you want to break the expenses down into what's necessary, what's discretionary, and then even further into the different categories in there, right? Eating out, entertainment, as an example, some people lump those together. Not always go hand in hand. So sometimes it's best to break it down as detailed as we can to figure out really what we're working with up to this point. And then we can decide from there how we need to allocate that into the budget. Now, there's a few different budgeting styles that I like to go over because not everyone is going to like all the different budgeting styles, right? We each grew up with a different household, different habits that we learned and developed over time through our family, friends, whoever we watched handle money. So we all have different behaviors and we respond differently to different situations when it comes to money. And so some of you may prefer the 50-30-20 plan, which I'm going to get into here in a minute. Others may prefer the zero-based, more detailed, nitty-gritty specific budgeting plan. So I'd encourage you as I go through these different options, think about which one may work best for you, which you may prefer to use, and then give it a try. If it doesn't work, switch to one of the others, right? It's always flexible with whenever it comes to budgeting and really accomplishing our financial goals, we're always trying to fail forward, right? We're always going to be quote unquote failing at our budgets, at our goals. We're always going to be coming up short, but that's okay because we're failing forward and trying something else. And we're always going to be a little bit closer to where we were before. There's another book called The Gap and the Gain, if you're familiar with that, where it encourages focusing not necessarily on how far you have to go until that next goal, but it encourages you to look back and see how far have I come. And if you look back and see how far have I actually come, that gets you more excited to move forward. So whenever it comes to budgeting or setting financial goals, I always recommend people look backwards and see how far have I come before we then look at what's next. Because sometimes it can be daunting looking at what's next, trying to budget when you failed before, right? It's all okay. It happens. It even happens to me. We need to be failing forward. So the 50-30-20 system essentially, just really simply, is you're categorizing your necessary expenses, your discretionary expenses, and then your financial priorities. And the recommended percentages, as you see here, is 50, 30, and 20. It's never going to be perfect. It's never going to fall perfectly into those guidelines. But what I like about this and the premise of this system is as long as you are properly funding your financial priorities, so properly saving towards those goals, it doesn't really matter too much what the rest of the money is doing, right? So if in reality your necessities are 60%, your discretionary is 20%, but you're still able to save 20% for those priorities, perfect, right? It's when we get the necessities to be 70%. The discretionary is 20%. Now we've only got 10% or less for those financial priorities. That's where we need to make some changes, right? So if you like this, I would encourage you to go back and see what percentage of your income has been going into each of these categories. And this tool that I'll introduce here in a minute actually follows this system here, so it can help you see that. What part of your budget is going to necessities, what is going to those discretionary expenses, and how much is left over for savings. And then ultimately, as long as you're able to properly fund those goals, it doesn't matter too much what goes into the other categories. So I like this one personally. I think it's a good starting point. And then you can, if you want to get more nitty-gritty into the details of each specific item in your budget, then you can do that at a later time. The 3 account plan is another simple option where instead of diving into all the details about each line item in your budget, you just have three accounts set up. You have your account for your general necessities, like your fixed expenses, so your housing payment, car payment, gas, food, all those things that you know are pretty predictable month to month and that you need to spend. That automatically goes, you can set it up through your payroll to automatically go into one account. You can't take anything out of that account except necessary expenses. Then the second account is for your discretionary expenses. That account is really yours to do whatever you want with. And this is maybe a good strategy for people who, if you see you have money in your account and you're susceptible just to spend that, that's okay in this strategy because you have this account. If you spend that down to zero, great. That's what it's for. But you can't touch that other account because that's for your necessary expenses. And then the third account, if you want to separate this, it's sometimes best to separate your savings into just a third account. And then again, automation is key. You can often set up through your payroll provider with your employer to have, say, 30% go to this account, 30% go to that account, so on and so forth, and have it split to different accounts just to help with that automation. Like I said, automation is very important. The last one is the zero-based system. This is, if you're familiar with Dave Ramsey, where, excuse me, every dollar has a purpose. That's where you list all of your line items in your budget and have a specific dollar amount going to each one of those. And then if you get to the bottom and you have $100 left over, great, let's allocate that to something specific within the budget. It's much more detail oriented. You can have an Excel spreadsheet that lists everything. There's different budgeting apps you can use for this as well. But I would say this is the one we see a lot of people more prone to give up, not be consistent and give up because it can be a little more daunting. So I encourage you to try some of those other ones first. And then if you want to get a little more detailed with the zero-based budgeting system, you can certainly do that. All right, just real quick, some keys to a successful budget. I already mentioned automation. That's just very important. Separate accounts, I would say, is another one. Personally, within my savings account, um, I personally use Capital One, not endorsing them. I just really like how their online system is very easy to set up additional accounts. So I have a emergency fund account, and then I have a holiday or gift budget where every month we have a certain amount going into that. So when it comes to time for Christmas and we need to buy gifts, we have that account we can then touch and not have to worry about it ruining our budget. We have phones, right? We have a phone account where we set up 15, 20 bucks a month to go into that phone budget. So when we need to buy new phones, which we did just a couple months ago, then it's already taken care of. We already know it's set aside for. So separate accounts, I would always say, is very important to having a successful budget. And if you keep it all in one account, but just have it separate in your mind, and you can do that, that's fine too. I like to encourage a waiting period for large purchases. That's where, say you're thinking of buying a car, rather than just going in impulse buying it, wait 24 hours or a couple days or even a week or a month, right? To make sure that it's not just an impulse purchase. And the last one I'd say is very important as well, connecting failure to success. We're never perfect with our budget, right? Nobody ever is. I'm certainly not. It's okay not to be perfect with your budget. The key is to have something in place that you can strive to be better at. And like I said, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 2 years in the future, you're going to look back and say, wow, I was never perfect, but yet I've come so far from that time. So know and expect that you're going to be imperfect. You're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. This is another big one that helps to make sure that we are okay even with those mistakes, even with those failures around our budget, is a safety net or an emergency fund. We say they're unexpected expenses, but we know we're going to have those unexpected expenses. So how unexpected are they really, right? We know there's going to be those unexpected expenses. Start with just $1,000 in a separate savings account for your safety net. If you don't have that, start with $1,000 a little bit at a time, work up slowly, build on that. I typically recommend between 3 to 6 months of non-discretionary, so those necessary expenses, 3 to 6 months of those saved in a savings account. Because like I said, they're more expected than we admit. We know that they're going to happen. We just don't know exactly how much they're going to be. So make sure you plan for those. All right, just lastly, I mentioned the software, the app that we have that you can access, and this is something that we pay for and that we offer everyone within the groups, whether you're connected to GBS Retired, GBS Benefits, Levitt Group, you can all access this, and it's just for your purpose, right? All the information that you enter in here is confidential. It doesn't get sold. We don't use it really internally. And so it's all for you to help you on your journey to retirement. It is truly a personalized wellness platform. And it's really the most efficient way that we've found to be able to offer personalized advice to as many people as we can without having to actually meet each and individually with each and every one of you. So you can create a free account, sign up, have a password in place where you can log in over time, grow and improve, build the plan. So it asks for quantitative and qualitative information. Where are you saving? How much are you saving? Do you budget? Do you have debt? When do you want to retire? All that information. And then you can connect with us if you want to review and help implement some of the recommended action items that it suggests. And here's the link if you want to sign up for that. Again, it's a free account. We want as many people to utilize it as possible. And again, it won't be shared with other folks. Good question on this. We had a question come through about if Saveology, so this tool, is shared with your employer. And if we are working with your employer, then yes, we likely have already shared this tool with your employer. If not, then it may not, if you're just through GBS Benefits or Levitt Group, may not have been shared. So reach out if you're curious about that, and we can look more into that. But just to wrap up today, because we're just at time, I did want to encourage you to keep an eye out for our next upcoming webinars for next year. We do have the 2026 calendars in place, so keep an eye out for those coming out. We'll see those next topics, which I'm very excited about. A lot of cool topics coming next year as well. I'll get to the questions here, but if you had more questions or more personal questions that we didn't want to answer with the group today, feel free to reach out. That's my direct email there, as well as our phone number. We're always happy to be a resource for you. And if you want to schedule a consultation, again, free consultation, feel free to scan that QR code and you can schedule a virtual one-on-one meeting with any one of our advisors here that can help answer those more personal questions. All right, so let me jump into the questions here. Got a couple of them. Budgeting app or software. Yeah, so I mentioned a couple of them earlier. I would say the big ones are Rocket Money is a big one. This tool, obviously, Saveology can be a big one. Copilot Money is another app that you can get and pay for. Dave Ramsey's Every Dollar is another one. If you're a big Dave Ramsey fan, Every Dollar can be a good one. That's going to follow more of that zero-based budgeting style, which is a bit more detailed. So if you like that strategy, that can be a good tool. I would say try the free trial, and if it works for you, great. If not, just delete it and move on, try another one. I didn't see retirement contributions in the budgeting wheel, so great question. So let me go back to that budgeting wheel here. And these percentages are just a guideline, right? Everyone's going to be a little bit different, but if you want to use this as kind of an example to structure your budget wheel on, can be a good idea. And I intentionally did not put retirement savings because I like to have our budgeting items be after, so our net pay. So after taxes, retirement savings, medical expenses, all of that just gets taken out already. So the retirement contributions should have already been taken out before it gets distributed into this pie chart here, if that makes sense. And the reason for that is because that should be the first thing, right? Get that taken off so you don't have to worry about it. And then this savings wedge here, the 10% you see here, that's, again, going to differ 10 to 20% depending on how many short and midterm goals you have, but that should be specific for your short and midterm goals. Great question. Are there any resources available to help us figure out how to pay off debt most efficiently, specifically for something like student loans? Yes, great question. So we done a couple presentations so far that included debt and some of the different strategies around paying that down. So you can go back and watch some of the recordings that we had. There's a couple different resources out there. Trying to think of one. Greenpath.com. Greenpath is let me see if I can pull up an example. Greenpath.com is a nonprofit organization, pull that up here, that has free debt counseling, right? So this is a great resource to share. Has free financial counseling, can help you evaluate how to structure that debt pay down strategy, as well as look at different debt consolidation to see if that makes sense. And so if you are struggling with debt, never hurts to just have a free financial counsel call with them. And again, completely unaffiliated with them. It's just a resource that I've found that I've heard good feedback on. So take a look at that if you're concerned, whether that's student loans, car loans, credit card loans, so on and so forth. But you're always welcome to come to us as well with those questions. Let's see, we have another question about slide before the three account plan. If we jump over to that. And as a reminder, the recording will be sent over tomorrow. So you'll get a recording of this presentation as well that you can go through. Another question about looking into those past recordings, and we have on our website, on GBS Benefits website, a link to all the different recordings that we've done this year, and we'll have those posted for next year as well. So I will put in I'm going to write a note to put in the follow-up email that you'll get tomorrow with the recording, a link to the previous recordings for this year as well. So you can go in and take a look at all the recordings that we have done, or the webinars that we have done for 2025. Love that question. All right, one more question here from Jeff. What is your recommended percentage for retirement savings? Dave Ramsey suggests 15% of total income, and would you include employer 401k match in that? Great question. So with that, I'm going to come back to this slide here because it all comes down to your priorities. And early on, if you can do 10 to 15%, all right, including employer contributions, then fantastic, right? You're going to be set up great for retirement. But that's often not what we see because early on, people are trying to build their emergency fund and trying to get out of debt, have kids, right? Just survive at times. And so they're not quite able to do the full 10 to 15% that's recommended. And then later on in their career, they're able to save a little bit more, and that grows to maybe 20, 25% at that time. That's a more common uh, implementation that we typically see. But in an ideal situation, ideal scenario, I would say 10 to 15%. You ideally excluding your employer contributions, but if you want to include that, it's probably fine. The risk is if you move to a different employer that doesn't have employer contributions, you just need to contribute more to make up for that. And after that, it all comes down to your goals, right? If you want to retire earlier, that 10 to 15% is not going to be sufficient. If you're okay retiring later, then you may only need to do 5%. So a lot of it does come down to your goals, which is the one thing that Dave Ramsey doesn't mention, which I'm sure if we asked him about it, he would say, yeah, that makes sense, is to think about your goals and what you want at retirement. Generally speaking, targeting 10 to 15% is going to get you a reasonably good retirement. Yep. Great question. All right. I'm not seeing any other questions come through here. So just as a reminder, we'll send out the recording through the follow-up email tomorrow. We'll pull up this QR code again if you want that. And then if you have any questions that come up, feel free to let us know. We're happy to be a resource for you. Oh, and then there's also going to be a survey after this presentation as well. We are always interested in your thoughts on the content and myself as well. So feel free to give honest feedback there. And with that, thank you for your time and have a wonderful holiday season. And we'll see you next month, next year.